And I'm sure we will surprise him. Andrew Ronsley trying to keep up and down with events. We're joined in the studio now by journalist and Jeremy Corbyn supporter Rachel Shabby, and by the woman many talent spotters are calling the new Angus Robertson, possibly future leader of the SNP, star of PMQs, Tasmina Ahmed Sheikh. Welcome to both of you. If that doesn't ruin your career, I don't know what will. Alan Johnson, this was a provincial England peasants' revolt, and Labour was on the wrong side of it.
The EU election. Well, listen, the EU result was a disaster all around. I mean, Cameron managed to get 42% of Conservative supporters. He's the leader of the party. He's the one who's called the referendum.
Sure, but we
only got
always
42% of his supporters.
He needed Labour votes. We always knew that he needed Labour votes
and we got Labour
to win.
votes, just not enough.
He doesn't get nearly enough. I mean,
well,
your
we got
area,
64%. We needed 70%.
Your area voted strongly to leave.
Yeah.
You're not a Corbynite. This wasn't just a problem for Mr. Corbyn.
No.
Yvette Cooper's area lost. Indeed, every Brownite, a centrist Labour MP, their area, outside of London, they voted to leave.
Yeah, but it was about Europe. I mean, if you look at the elections, which is only just over a year ago, in most of those seats we had an increased majority, including mine. The issue of Europe, and in particular the issue of immigration, because this became a referendum on immigration. Make no mistake about that. From the time the net migration figures came out, 333,000, it turned from a debate about Europe and the economy.
But
immigration was always there, but suddenly it was
sure.
really it's one of the mistakes Boris Johnson made in his article we've just been talking about in the Telegraph on Monday. He said it was nothing to do with my immigration. Well, I think it was.
But these were people that the politicians had ignored, derided, dismissed, called bigoted, if they even raised it. They were Labour voters in large numbers, and they ignored their party. This was their probably last chance to give the establishment of the centre, left and right a bloody nose, and they did.
That's your assessment. I don't accept that these people were ignored. I don't accept that we never talked about immigration. Sometimes it seemed to me we didn't talk about anything else.
But you had
in
nothing to tell them
debating
about
this
it.
issue. Well, we did, in the sense that, you know, here was the Prime Minister fighting two elections on promising to get net migration down to the tens of thousands. Here was the same Prime Minister encouraging people to vote yes for the EU, having not just failed, but got... I mean, net migration was 118,000 when I was the Home Secretary.
That's why they voted against him.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Is this the right perspective to see it through?
Yes. I think it's a lethal combination of people being worried about immigration and despising the elite. And whenever they raised the question of immigration with the elite changed the subject. Actually, Gordon Brown was, again, the best example during the referendum campaign. He was asked about immigration. And first of all, he said it was a BBC obsession. Then he said it was an obsession of the Sun newspaper.
And the only issue was illegal immigration, he said.
Simply would not acknowledge that the people want to talk about it. Whenever David Cameron was asked about immigration, he started to talk about the economy. When Jeremy Corbyn said that you could not limit immigration if you were inside the European Union, the Labour Party set upon him for the cardinal sin of having told the truth.
But was it not more than just immigration? Was this not also a revolt of people who hadn't done well out of globalisation? That in big cities like London, most people think that overall they've done pretty well out of globalisation. If you go into the Midlands and further north of England, there are plenty of people who don't feel they've done well. That inequality has widened, and the world has kind of passed them by. And this was their revolt.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a vote in the only way that became available to them. I mean, general elections certainly haven't helped. To be clear, this is the neglect, the absolute neglect that has resulted in daily struggles, daily stress, daily wondering how you're going to get through the week, is a result of a system started by Thatcherism, perpetuated under New Labour, and continued under the Conservatives with these horrific austerity cuts. And the interesting thing about
but that's a different issue.
Well, it's exactly the same issue.
Well,
and the
it's not
interesting
actually.
thing about...
Are you really blaming this on austerity?
I'm saying austerity exacerbated a pre-existing condition
right.
begun
Okay.
by Thatcherism and continued through New Labour. But the interesting thing about immigration is that, you know, there's a big difference between understanding that people are concerned about the strains caused by immigration and wanting to find solutions to that. So that would involve the sort of things that Jeremy Corbyn is talking about, which is making sure that employers don't undercut workers by bringing in cheaper migrant labour.
But that's essentially
which,
that's the illegal part
you
of
see, we try
immigration.
and have this conversation about politics. You actually never allow it, do you? Can we
Yes,
actually?
I do. I just like putting points to you so it's not a monologue. And what I'm saying is the undercutting of labour, of paying below the minimum wage, is essentially a phenomenon of illegal immigration.
It's not a phenomenon of illegal immigration. It's a system by which companies are allowed to undercut local wages with migrant labour. The other way to address that is to look at areas that have been affected by large numbers of migrants and give them more funding. That's something that the Conservative government cut. The other way to look at it is to re-skill a population, or you could embark on major infrastructure projects like housing.
Which was particularly not done.
And these are all things that actually have been put forward by Jeremy Corbyn.
Let me bring in Tasmina. Of course, Scotland didn't have the revolt on this because you'd already had your anti-establishment revolt. You replaced the Labour establishment in Scotland. So it was a different dynamic.
The SNP and the pro-European campaign was a hugely positive campaign in Scotland, fought on a completely different playing field to that we've seen down south. And as we've already heard from Michael and Alan, you know, the idea of fighting this campaign on the basis of immigration was never going to be a good thing. And what do we have today? A fivefold increase in racist attacks. And you know, people even on LBC today, there was somebody on crying about you know, the effects of these attacks on them. So you know, we're working with a completely different framework, a positive campaign. And what did we have? 62%, every single local authority in Scotland voting to remain within the EU. The question is what then happened after that, Andrew, because I think even a week on, the rest of the United Kingdom is still in absolute shock as being, you know, feeling that they are without a plan. In Scotland, of course, we're in a completely different position. You know, within minutes, Nicola Sturgeon had made a statement. There was a meeting of the Cabinet on Saturday. I don't think anyone can deny that Nicola has a plan for
let's
Scotland.
just look at what this plan might be. Will the Scottish Government stage a second independence referendum before the Brexit process is complete?
Well, the First Minister has made it quite clear that there are a number of options on the table. None of them are off the table. And I think it's hugely important that she made that point.
Sure, but you said you had a plan.
But then beyond that, actually, she actually has, you know, the Scottish Parliament behind her, which is very important.
But what I'm asking is, if you've got a plan, does that plan involve a second independence referendum before the UK has completed the Brexit process?
That is one of the options. Absolutely, absolutely
there isn't
it
a
is.
plan,
But she's been in Brussels having meetings, unprecedented meetings, I should say.
No, I know that. I've been watching that carefully.
But it's important because
I'm trying to work out where we're going.
But it must be taken
so, well,
within
let me
the whole
ask you this.
framework. The whole framework is she's out there to get the best possible deal for Scotland.
I know, but all that's a kind of posturing. I'm trying to work out where we're going here.
That's not
will
posturing.
You
It's
secure
practical action.
Will the plan, if there is one, that you say there is, will that secure membership of the EU for Scotland before you recommend that Scotland leaves the UK?
Well, you know, you talk about a plan. We have a number of options because, of course,
you talked about a plan.
well, you asked me about the plan. Of course, it's not within our gift to decide what might happen because there are a number of negotiations and discussions to take place with the UK government within the framework of Brexit and also with our friends in the European Union with whom we've had very positive discussions. And it's important to know, Andrew.
I understand that, but I'm just trying to get this clear. If you're going to go for a second referendum, will it be the aim of the Scottish Government, first of all, to clinch EU membership for Scotland before you then put independence to the Scottish people?
Absolutely want to have a clear position in terms of our membership of the EU, and that is why it is very important that our First Minister be involved in the discussions, that whoever will be having them, obviously it's not David Cameron, the people of this country don't know who that's going to be, with our
But these are
partners
discussions
in the EU.
to leave. Let me try one more time.
But there are many options,
Will
Andrew.
you clinch EU membership? Will you get an agreement with the EU that if you come out of the UK, your EU membership as an independent nation is guaranteed before the referendum?
Well, let me just rewind you back to 2014, Andrew. But this is
I've done
important.
2014.
But it's very important because everything should be seen within a context. Let's remember the people of Scotland have voted 62% to remain within the EU. That is their wish, and it is the job of the First Minister to execute
I understand that.
These same people, the people in Scotland, were told that to remain in the EU we had to vote no in the Scottish independence referendum. Therefore, it is correct that any vote on IndyRef 2 be framed within the EU context.
I understand that, but I'm just trying to get clear what the strategy would be. But it's early days. We're only a week and no one seems to know what their strategy is.
Oh, Nicola Sturgeon knows what the strategy is.
Well, I've
that's
just asked you some
sure.
questions and you've not been able to tell me
But
what
I
the
have, Andrew. I've
strategy
answered
is.
all of your questions.
Well, I'm not sure you have, but as usual, the viewers will make up their minds. At a time when the opportunities for an opposition have never been greater, in many ways more needed, why is the Labour Party a dysfunctional mess?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I think, you know, bad enough that the Labour Party has chosen this moment when we desperately need, as you say, a strong and robust opposition to tear themselves apart. Bad enough that they're doing it in such a calculated way so that they're staggering the resignation so that they dominate the media cycle instead of, for example, either the mess we're in or the Conservative Party. Bad enough that they're trying to blame Jeremy Corbyn for having failed to secure a Remain vote when in fact he got as much of the votes as Nicola Sturgeon's SNP did. But to top it all off, this is the worst coup I've ever seen.
In what sense?
There's no plan. There's no leader. Who's the candidate? What's the platform? What's the politics? They know that they don't have the support either of the party membership, which still backs the democratically elected Labour leader, or the unions. If you're going to orchestrate a coup, make it credible,
All right,
especially if you're going to accuse the leader of incompetence.
Alan Johnson, is this a coup and is it badly planned? And has it all been staged
It was
suggested?
badly planned, and it's precisely because it wasn't staged. Just a kind
been
of
planned for
internal
weeks.
combustion. Look, you cannot survive as the leader of a political party without the support of the people you work with more closely, most closely. And on Europe, I'm afraid Jeremy didn't put his heart and soul into it, and there were people in his office who were absolutely levers. They were like Michael. They thought that Europe was a capitalist conspiracy. And so there was the Labour Party fighting very hard. I take my responsibility, incidentally, for not winning that as the chair of Labour in for Britain. Leadership take no responsibility whatsoever. Jeremy says that the campaign I was running was euphoric. It's the benefit of the first two letters being EU. And he had to kind of ride in and say it should be Remain and reform, so you just list all the things wrong with Europe. That wasn't what the party was doing. But look, leaving all that aside, Jeremy is never going to command the support of the people he works with most closely. You saw there Lisa Nandy and Owen Smith, two people who tried really hard. This is not about people like me who can't, terrible Blairites, which is the worst insult you could possibly use. And it's not racist anymore, or it's Blairite. Leave me aside. They've tried really hard, and many people have tried really hard. It ain't working. It's not gonna.
Okay.
It's not gonna. And you can't instill confidence in a leader through intimidation.
If there is a leadership challenge, and we're still waiting on one, and it goes to the country in terms of the membership of the Labour Party in the country, and Mr Corbyn wins, as a poll in tomorrow's Times suggests it may not be quite as easy as some of his supporters think, but he's still ahead if he wins. Doesn't that risk splitting the Labour Party asunder?
Well,
It wasn't meant to make you laugh.
Well,
was
it's
it?
rather understating the situation, isn't it? I mean, first of all, would he be a candidate on the ballot? I think that might need to be something that was tested.
Well, let's assume that he is.
Well, no, because I think
natural justice would suggest he should be. He is the incumbent.
I disagree with that, and I think it ought to be tested in the courts. And I think that may be where the Labour Party has to go.
You guys are deluding yourselves. You are both deluding
no,
yourselves.
you're deluding
He's
yourself.
on the ballot. That's why you won't raise a leadership candidate, because you know
But the only people on the ballot,
whoever you
people who
put
have
up
the
against him
confidence.
is going to lose.
The people,
May I
people on
just-
the ballot, the people who've got the
May I just
confidence of
ask
the
you,
PLP.
on the subject of delusion,
That's how it works.
how will you fight a general election when every interviewer, like Andrew, will simply say to every candidate, why should anyone think that Jeremy Corbyn could be Prime Minister when 80% of his members
Because
of Parliament don't?
The only way you can ask
There's
that
no- there's
question
no way
is
of
that you've
answering.
completely misunderstood the appeal of Jeremy Corbyn and his politics. You've completely misunderstood why that kind of politics resonate so strongly with the population
kind of
and with
politics
Labour
is this?
voters, you would never be asking that question if you had any inkling of why it's so powerful and so popular.
But where we are,
You've made me a happy man tonight.
we really do very quickly have to move the argument on from who's leading which party, because at the end of the day, we faced a vote, we have a result. People are concerned with what this means for jobs, what it means for trade, what it means for investment, what it means for them in their own home lifestyle. And, you know, all of this bickering doesn't help anyone. Honestly, Andrew, in the House of Commons this week, it's been quite unbelievable watching across the way that the Tories bickering amongst each other, and again in the Labour Party, where all the people want is a plan. And everyone has gone, well, Osborne was missing in inaction.
All right, no,
Boris was playing
that.
cricket. Where were they all?
Sure, I understand that.
You could
but
literally get
when-
someone off the street and they do a
when
better
the-
job than
when
our
the-
elected leaders.
When
true.
the establishments had the bloody nose it's had on June the 23rd, it is not surprising that both Her Majesty's government and Her Majesty's opposition are in various degrees of disarray.
Indeed, but we've
That's
not
what
had
happens.
a plan before. Would you not?
Well,
if you're the government of the country,
a sign
I'm still
of
trying to work
leadership,
out.
isn't it, being able
My
to-
advice
If
is
you're the government,
you
you'd have
get
a
your
plan
plan
before the
right and
vote.
come back and let me
You
interview
would have a
again.
plan before the vote.
You get your
I
plan
actually
and I'll be
want
happy to. I would
Nicola
like to hear the
Sturgeon's
plan.
SNP to occupy England.
I've got a
There we
plan.
are.
We'd be much better off that way.
That'll really get English votes. Well done. Now, it's being said a lot that last week's referendum
Right
shows
enough, Andrew.
a divided nation. Are you going to heckle me or can I do my job? Referenda,